break down each of the words that Stephen Miller said there, right? First, he said, like, it's very clear that. Well, actually, you're misrepresenting. It's very clear that you have to follow the Constitution. That's what's clear. Not that you can just suspend habeas corpus whenever you want. I mean, absolutely not. Then the threat was basically, if we hope the courts do the right thing, that's a threat to the Supreme Court. It's very clear. Basically, we will start sending tanks in DC. We will start using the military against American citizens, and we will declare martial law, and we will start doing these things if you don't rule in favor of us, if you make us look bad in these rulings. So be careful what you do. Now, he didn't use all those words that I just said, but I've spoken now to a lot of constitutional scholars who we have on the Legal AF channel and our channel here. They all say the same thing. So Popok, I know we're going to talk about like what happened in Judge Boasberg's court involving the class action, where Boasberg wants to have discovery regarding, what's going on in El Salvador. We're going to talk about Judge Zinnes, of course, what's going on there, where the Trump regime invoked the state secrets doctrine. Southern District of Texas, a Trump appointed judge, ruling the Alien Enemies Act unlawful. Judge Hellerstein, Southern District of New York, Clinton appointee, Alien Enemies Act unlawful. Judge in Colorado, judge in Maryland. They're all, but at the heart of it is this issue, right, Pope? It's due process. And we're here, I think, sooner than many people expected, that this is the showdown. We're here.
When we last saw Donald Trump in the White House before this first 110 days, we know towards the end he was considering the suspension of the Constitution, the declaration of martial law, the seizing of voting equipment. They had an executive order already drafted. It's part of the evidence in the Jan 6th and the interference case against Donald Trump, and in the Jan 6th committee's report that was being pushed at the time by Sidney Powell and Rudy Giuliani and Patrick Byrne from Overstock.com and others. So Donald Trump has an allergic reaction to the Constitution and his requirements. And when he doesn't like what it says, he ignores it. When he doesn't like what the Supreme Court says, he either ignores it or he twists their words out of all recognition. He carries around a very strange version of the Constitution in his back pocket. It only has two provisions. It's got Article 2, which is the power of the presidency, and the Second Amendment. Everything else is cut out like one of these paper doll things. And when you combine that with having people, and I agree with you that Stephen Miller, and I've been calling it out, you've been calling it out since the administration started. Stephen Miller has become the only one, apparently, according to other reporting, that has walk-in rights, meaning he can barge into the White House, the Oval Office, anytime he wants and sit down with the president. He's the last word, literally. He stays in the room till everybody is left. He's Donald Trump's Svengali. He's the puppet master. It's not Elon Musk as the domestic policy president or even foreign policy president. It is Stephen Miller as Donald Trump's brain at this point. He's not a lawyer. Although he was the architect for the original depraved immigration policy the first time around in the first administration. The reason kids were separated from their parents and put in cages, see Stephen Miller. Stephen Miller is also the architect of the whole use of the Alien Enemies Act. Again, a non-lawyer, playing one on TV or playing one in the White House. He's the reason that the Alien Enemies Act was invoked. He's the reason that Donald Trump came up with the phony proclamation that we are at war with Venezuela. And we have enemy combatants in our midst in the form of Tren de Aragua. That's all a lie. It's been blown open as a lie in various things that you and I have learned and shared with our audience the last 2 weeks, including internal memos from the intelligence community of Donald Trump, which says that's a lie. And then you have what we always feared. You and I actually talked about it 3 weeks ago. I said at one point, and I said it in a hot take about a week ago, that we are dangerously close to Donald Trump declaring the suspension of the Constitution and declaring martial law. And he's effectively done that. This is not even a slippery slope, because there's no slope between what Stephen Miller just did, just blithely in the gravel driveway of the White House to reporters, and announcing that they're considering suspending the quote unquote privilege of writ of habeas corpus. That is it's actually a requirement, even though the word privilege was used. That's really an old timey way of saying it's a due process right of people, as the Supreme Court has interpreted. We're going to suspend it. Now, the only way you could ever suspend it, and it's only been suspended 4 times in our history, and always during a time of war. And that is if we have an invasion, back to predatory invasion, or a warlike event going on. So we have to get rid of the niceties of our constitutional due process. Habeas corpus, for those, I don't want to just use these terms of art without explaining them. The writ of habeas corpus is the very foundation of everything that is right in our Constitution about due process rights and the right of somebody to be taken before a federal judge and not left to rot in a dank, dark prison like the Count of Monte Cristo or like Abrego Garcia in a gulag overseas. The reason we keep talking in all these cases about due process and notice, about writs of habeas corpus, which is the way that the Supreme Court in their 6-3 decision in their 6-3 decision in the JGG case, as they ruled, they said, you want to send people to a gulag, you can do whatever you want after you give them due process through a writ of habeas corpus and get that person before a federal judge. And then that federal judge can make a decision whether the Alien Enemies Act has been properly invoked and whether due process has been properly given to this particular person. They don't want to hear that. They didn't hear it, and they don't want to hear it. And so Stephen Miller's saying, here's an idea. We'll just be consistent and press a losing hand. The losing hand that they're pressing is that they don't have to give constitutional due process, and they can summarily remove and deport people, and that could be you and me and everybody else, to prisons if they, quote unquote, have a predatory invasion or incursion or warlike event. And they can also, that's the losing hand, they could also suspend the writ of habeas corpus. And this, I have to tell you, even that staggering comment must have put a chill down the spine of many members of the United States Supreme Court, not just the moderates or the liberals on the court, including somebody like Chief Justice Roberts. Because to say that we're going to trump up a wag the dog moment and create a phony war in order to do things like roll up the Constitution and put it away for a period of time. And so that's why I said Ben, it's not a slippery slope. Slippery slope implies we got to go a certain distance to get to that. We are here, ladies and gentlemen. The fact that they're even considering that means the attorneys general, the ACLUs, the public interest groups, the Mighty, the legal aid offers, we got to be ready to file in court at the appropriate moment, haven't drafted already, the lawsuit and the injunction to stop the suspension of our Constitution and the removal of the writ of habeas corpus right. I never thought in my lifetime, in anyone's lifetime, that we'd ever be talking about that. This is not the Civil War. This is not World War II. This is not the Philippines. This is 2025 America, a democracy. The only thing that happened in November that should have changed is who's occupying the White House, not the very government and the bedrock of our constitutional republic.
So we're seeing Supreme Court justices at various events now vocalizing these things, right? I mean, it's mostly the liberal members, right? We've saw 2 weeks ago, Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson at an event in Puerto Rico. Justice Sotomayor spoke this past week, of all places, at an American Bar Association event, which I thought was notable as well, because Donald Trump has banned Department of Justice lawyers from acknowledging the existence of the American Bar Association, which they've labeled a bad actor, a leftist, radical, liberal group. The American Bar Association, which is anything but that helps promulgate ethics rules and, has always been viewed as bipartisan, I've never been viewed as a political thing at all. It simply is an organization that stands for due process, and then they have subject matter areas of expertise. Anyway, Justice Sotomayor was speaking at the American Bar Association, and she had a message basically to lawyers, like, you can't capitulate right now. And if you're weak and you can't handle this, don't become lawyers. We need courageous lawyers, not weak lawyers. And then she talked about the threat that was taking place. And then you also had Chief Justice Roberts